been up to these days? I haven't seen you in quite a while.
Not much, man. Working, brewing as much as I can.
Yeah, dude. So let's get into that brewing portion. That's the main reason we came on here. I know Mr. Chafee was very excited when I told him you were coming on. He's like, you should definitely interview Matt Paiva about beer. I want to hear all about the ingredients, all about everything. So
there's at least one person out there.
Someone's going to listen to it.
Everyone
listens to all of them.
Talk.
All right, let's start from the top here. So how'd you get into brewing? Where did that come about?
So I got into drinking, I guess, first.
Oh, yeah?
My claim to fame in college was like going to the Muse and trying all 69 beers on tap. Like we'd go there, like that's
every night.
No, not every night, but have quite a few when you're there, I guess, responsibly. But started getting into like things other than Keystone Light, and like kind of realizing like, oh, there's some different stuff out there, and at least was like on my radar. But then, I think like the craft beer that really did it, I had a couple. Like 4 years ago, Treehouse's Julius, and I was like the first time like really good New England style IPAs was like, this is amazing, and I started getting into that like avid craft drinker, and I'd said it before, like a couple times in passing. I'm like, what if I made beer? I wonder if that's possible. I had no idea what to do. I probably said it to my fiance like once. So Christmas comes around. She happens to get me a homebrew kit.
Goddess.
All right. Coincidentally, my sister and now brother-in-law got me a homebrew kit too. So it was two different kits. So now I've kind of merged them.
Right.
And I had like a super kit. It was pretty cool. And my fiance Hillary was like, I wasn't even sure if you're gonna like it. You want to do, if you'd do it one and done, whatever. And so I did the first batch, and like it wasn't even like fully cooled. I'm like, this is amazing. I love it. I want to do this a lot. And like every single person ever is like, who has ever made a batch of beer, like, I wonder what it would like to be owning a brewery. So like I remember avidly, like I just brewed, it's in the next room. I'm like, man, what would it be like? Like kind of daydreaming, still daydream. But, so yeah, anytime I get into some sort of hobby, I go down the rabbit hole.
And you just never come out.
Well, sometimes like I get down and like, I'm not interested in this anymore. And, like I perseverate for a little bit and then I move on. This one, I just kind of kept going, whether it's like, I've done things and quit like powerlifting.
Yeah. Everyone's done that. Everyone's quit that.
Got into that for a little bit. And I was like, I hate feeling I got hit by a train.
Every single day. I don't miss it at all. I was at the gym today and I was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't miss powerlifting in the least. I've said this so many times. I'll never, ever go back to it. I haven't deadlifted in probably like 3 years.
I'll still do it here and there, but like not to like I don't want to ever compete again. I have zero desire to do that.
Yeah, I have no desire to ever compete again. I've actually been getting into jiu-jitsu lately.
Man, you are really Joe Rogan, huh? You're emulating full time.
I basically am. I should change the name of the podcast to the Josh Fenton Experience. Honestly, I've honestly thought about that, but that's like, all right, that's way too like obvious that I'm just copying him. Like I couldn't even like get myself to do that, even though that'd be a pretty cool name. Yeah, right. Like just like put on a bunch of weight, just start taking ivermectin and all these things. Like move to Texas, like you were saying.
Right.
I went to Treehouse for the first time over the summer. I don't know if I'd ever go back.
What's that?
It was so busy.
Yeah.
So I went with Panakia, right? And from the time we parked, it took us 45 minutes to get our first beer.
That's hilarious because that's super quick.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the longest you've waited? 2 hours?
3 hours.
Dude, are you serious?
So it's like part of the experience just because you're driving. It's only an hour and a half, but it is like so inaccessible to get there for us anyway.
Yeah.
Like you hop on the highway. It's not like 95 Mass Pike or whatever. You gotta like go through these neighborhoods and stuff. So like whatever, you're there. It takes an hour and a half to get there, and then you see the line like, oh crap. So we waited. Actually, the very first time we didn't realize there was two lines, one for draft pours, one for cans. So, so we just obviously go on the shorter line. Waited. That time was probably an hour and a half, and we realized it was only for pours. So I got two pours, but I'm like, I don't even get to take anything home out of this whole experience. I was so like dejected. But then, I mean, I've also timed it. Like my job makes it kind of easy in the summer to shoot wherever.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't really work in the summer.
Right.
So I'd shoot there and like try to time it perfectly, like doors about to close or something like that, head in. But they've like streamlined stuff so much better. They're making so much more. There's so much more available. Before, like everything was selling out all the time.
Right.
So yeah, it's a long way to come say like I had that beer and I got like really into craft beer.
It's weird that they only let you get 2 beers. Is that like a production thing? Do you have any idea?
If I were to assume, I mean, most of those beers you're getting are 7.5%, 8%.
That's also true.
And you're putting those down, and the last thing I'm sure they want is someone having 5 of those beers and taking off. And like that facility is absolutely gorgeous. Like that is millions and millions of dollars.
Oh my god, dude, it's huge.
So I'm assuming that's the way they're like, hey, I don't know, it's just easier that and to get people in and out. There's a line. You don't want people staying the whole time, even if they had a beer, but then they're in there for 2 hours.
That's a very good point as well.
You know, you got to keep people moving. That's just my best guess anyway.
It's also in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing out there. When we went, we were looking for somewhere to eat. There's nothing up there near it.
There's
Absolutely
a barbecue
nothing.
joint down the road. But
Is there
actually,
really?
they closed for a little bit because of COVID and everything. I don't remember when they opened up, but yeah, it's really not much going on. I mean, we don't know the area too well either. So,
Like you were saying, it really is a nice facility. I wonder how long it took them to build up to that. Because there's no way you just woke up and had that $1 million facility.
Munson, and they had like a tiny hole in the wall place, and like that's when you have like the true beer hipsters who are like, this beer is so much better at Munson.
That's funny.
You know, but they kept growing and growing, and now they do cold brew, they do rum now. Like they're doing it.
They have everything, and all those beers taste like water.
Yeah,
Which is scary. It just goes back to your point.
It goes down so easy, and like that's like that style of New England or Northeast or whoever wants to call it, whatever. But I'll call it New England IPA. Like it's a hoppy beer and goes down easy. I mean, I remember back drinking at the Muse, like having like a Dogfish 90-minute or something like that, which is way more bitter. Like the West Coast hoppy beers were really popular at that time in the like mid 2010s, and it has like that bite, almost like pine cones and bitterness. And a lot of people are like, oh, I hate IPAs because of that taste. Then comes this New England style that was ushered in by like Heady Topper and stuff, and now it's turned a lot of people into that hoppy beer avenue, or turned them onto it.
Yeah. All right. Start from the top here, or kind of, we already started from the top. We'll go one step down from the top. So talk to me about the different beers you've made and kind of the different processes behind them. So like lagers, stouts, whatever the case may be.
So I've dabbled in a few styles. I mean, there are just so many like obscure things that people like to go down. That's the cool thing about homebrewing. You can do that. Let's see. My very first beer was a brown ale, which is like, I want to say 95% of people, that's their first beer. God awful. Worst thing ever. I bottled it up, drank like one. It was absolutely horrific, but I'd already started my next batch before that one was done.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And I went down that rabbit hole, like I said before. Stout, like it's really 2 main categories, I'll call it, just lagers and ales. Most people don't have the capability to do lagers, so until recently I didn't either. Ales will ferment roughly at room temperature. You know, when you're first beginning, it really doesn't matter. Like anybody can make beer. It's then, what can you do to make this? Like, it's hard to make great beer.
Right.
And then like once I realized like, all right, I'm making something that's pretty good. Like, how can I make this a little better? And obviously I wanted to make New England style IPAs. But there are so many like factors, like you got to keep oxygen out and all this other stuff. It's like, all right, well, if I really want to do it good, I got to do it this way. So then, like I get the next piece of equipment. So I start going down that rabbit hole. And so I've tried a few different stouts, sour beers, but like because New England IPA is kind of my thing, I want to make a good one. And like had some okay ones at first, and maybe just because like teaching aspect of me, I'm like, all right, well, how do I want to know as much about this as possible. I want to know the science behind it. It's like I just completely consume material. Like I have stacks of books, and like I probably understood a fraction of it, you know. And in retrospect, like I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly could. Now, like looking back, I'm like, oh, there's no way I fully understood what thiols and monoterpenes were. And now it's like, all right, but at least like I was exposed to it. I knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
But I had brewed for 1 year. I think it was 2019. Maybe even 2020. Either way, I brewed basically one recipe for an entire year. But I would change
one recipe.
I would change one variable. I would do other batches on the side, like a kettle sour or something like that, to gonna get my feet wet in something else, but I would do one recipe and I would change a variable. Because like if I'm doing new yeast, new hops, new grains, I'm like, I have no idea what hit, what didn't that time. Like what's in this batch, like what made it taste like shit? Or like, hey, it was a home run. I have no idea what it did. So I try to like limit the variables. And that's when I kind of realized like, all right, can't change too much. Or, you know, even playing with like water is such a huge factor that I wasn't sure, like, you know, I can't be changing my hops if I'm changing all of these other salts and minerals to my water. So like, for a while I actually made the same exact recipe, just changing water additions.
Yeah.
So that was a whole nother process, and I still haven't nailed it. Yeah. But I consistently make like better beer. You know, like I've done a couple competitions and stuff like that, sending my beer out.
Have you really? Have you done?
The one I sent out, I got third place, and it's by categories, not third place out of 1,000 beers. So there's different categories of beers. So in the IPAs, I got third place, and that was a year ago, and I've already learned so much more since then. Then I've done like a couple of local competitions. I joined a homebrew club, so like we'll do different stuff. Like we all brew one recipe, and like, you know, who's came out the best or whatever, and it kind of seems almost like counterintuitive, like, oh, you guys all the same recipe, it's going to come out identical, but it's so much about process.
Right.
And that's kind of what I obsess over. Like, I absolutely love the science of it.
I remember you recommended that book to me. What was the name of it? How to
Brew
beer?
by John
How to
Palmer.
Brew. Yeah, it was very, very long. That was basically a chemistry textbook.
Yeah, I at least thumbed through that like within a week. Like I was all about it.
Wow.
And I still reference it all the time. So
Really?
he was, and if anybody is like a super homebrewing person, probably to give me some slack here, but I believe he was an engineer. And actually, that's same thing. There's another really popular homebrewer, Charlie Papazian. He was like a rocket scientist.
Oh, that's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Charlie Papazian's book. And he was like homebrewing since like the late 80s, I believe. And like that's when like you just had your cooler and you had a kettle. Now technology has completely changed. And it's, I mean, even commercial breweries have completely changed because of the technology that's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, that's another thing I'm just going down to multiple tangents right now.
Go for it.
When I started like talking to other homebrew people, I wanted to get out there and learn more. It's just a bunch of like super smart people with disposable income. Like I joined the Round Brewing Society, local brew club. The first guy I talked to, Alex, Dr. Alex, shout out. Hopefully you'll watch this in North Carolina. He moved. He's doctor of chemistry at Brown University.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like he's a smart dude. The second guy was a clinical psychologist. Someone else was an engineer. I'm like, holy cow.
And then
like,
there's
I
you.
feel little in this room. I'm like, I'm a high school teacher. And I like to make beer.
Teach history.
Yeah, right?
So you said lagers were harder to make. Why are those harder to make?
Processing. So like it's pretty much all the same process. You're gonna ferment, then you're gonna cold crash. So you're gonna get everything out of there. You want to put it in a keg, bottles, whatever you want to do. But lagering itself requires to be a lot cooler. So like ales, for the most part, you can do it room temperature. Like optimum range for a lot of ales are between like 65 to 70 degrees. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not too bad. Lagers are gonna ferment typically around 55, and not everyone has a spare fridge that they can use. Like you'll take like a temperature controller and basically override your fridge so you can keep it at whatever temperature you want. Like I did that with the chest freezer and made a homemade kegerator from it so I can keep it at like 45 degrees. So lager is not the temperature control is the hard part. That and the patience, which I don't have.
How long does it take to brew a lager? How long does that take to finish?
It depends. Like you have some people that are like purists. So like you'll have, let's call it 2 weeks to ferment. You need to bring it up to temperature to do what is called the diacetyl rest. Basically, the yeast will clean up any like bad flavors, crash it down to lager as close to freezing as you can get, and you're supposed to lager it. I mean, I'll typically do like a couple weeks, and then I already start tapping into it to like, taste it. But like true lagering is supposed to be 1 week for every degree Plato. So Plato is a measurement of like how much dissolved sugar is in the beer.
Okay.
So you have a 10 Plato beer, or which is roughly like a 1050 specific gravity, which is just the density. It's not all that fancy. So it's 1 week for every degree Plato, which is like an old rule of thumb. So like you take one beer, you make it great, and then that's like 2-3 weeks. Then you got to let it sit for another 10 weeks. Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
It's
I don't have that patience.
That's a quarter of a year. That's insane.
Right? And that's like for that style, like I just got my hands on an oak barrel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's actually I'm really excited, as you can tell, and it's pretty awesome because like everyone in my family, especially my fiance, who's gotten like super behind this, like supports it. Like I leave beer brewing stuff all around the house. Like I'm constantly cleaning stuff. Like I had a brew day yesterday. My garage is everywhere. I've got like flasks and stuff all over the place, and like she really doesn't give me any.
Wow.
She supports it, so that's cool.
She
But,
started it. It's her fault.
She did, right?
She built this.
So I can just blame it on her. But my dad, who is like the most old school, like American lager is what I drink. Like, actually drinks Heineken. Only drink that like near flavorless beer, but he'll try everything I like. And he's like one of the people who are like the most brutally honest people in the world. He's just very blunt. It's like, it's probably good, but I hate it.
Why do you say
He's
that?
like whatever beer, because he will not drink. Like he hates hoppy beer. He will drink it. He'll taste it because I've ate it. Like one of the best compliments he gave is like, "Wow, I really don't like that, but like I could see people buying that in a store." I'm like, "Thank you in your own weird way."
I think
That's just how he is. He's blunt, but I mean, that was a compliment coming from him. Anyway, he wanted to contribute to my growing like craft into this. And I was talking about a barrel one time, and he like did all of his research. Now he's somebody who is like isn't on the internet all too often. Like he'll scroll a little bit, but so he found like a barrel company, called up customer service, who probably only deals with online stuff. And he was like, "All right, so walk me through this barrel stuff." And he got like the best recommendation for that size, and he surprised me with it. And so I started getting into barrel aged beer.
There you go.
Which is a whole nother thing. Like I was saying, I like brewing New England IPAs because, you know, it's what I drink or whatever. And that whole process is you got to keep oxygen out. You need to keep it as sterile as possible. When you throw it in a barrel, it's like, all right, just chuck it in there and we'll check in on it in a few months.
Yeah, I was going to say, that must be like not nearly as tedious, right? Because you can
It's way more steps. Like you're leaving it alone, but like...
But this, what else goes into it?
So like you need to make sure your barrel's clean. And basically your barrel isn't perfectly clean. Well, first off, ever, because things live in the wood.
Right.
But like between, you got to fill it, you got to make sure that it's like the wood's properly hydrated when it's not full. Like taking care of the barrel, I realized is like a lot of work. And I had never made a barrel beer, so I'm like, all right, let me toss this like super plain blonde ale in there. It's like 4.5%. Because I wanted it just plain to see what the barrel actually tasted like. Mm-hmm. So I got to play around with that, which is really cool. And it's a 10-gallon barrel. I usually make 5-gallon stuff. So by the time I killed one keg, which is weeks, because like, you know, I am giving stuff around, but like 5 gallons goes a long way.
Yeah.
The second keg was like finally ready, like sitting at like lagering temps, even though it was an ale. So it was like crystal clear, way better. So it was cool. I still have a lot to learn on it, but it's completely different than a New England style IPA because it's putting in a barrel is slowly adding oxygen to it. Whereas like, and like you want some of that funky stuff from stuff that live in the wood. And it's kind of weird to say, like a lot of sour beers are made in wood barrels because that bacteria or strains of bacteria will stay in there. Yeast will stay in that wood. You fill in the next beer and that kind of inoculates the next batch.
Gotcha. How did it taste when you tried that ale? Did it taste okay?
Yeah, I actually still have. I was gonna bring some today, but I didn't fill a growler. I pictured us like drinking while we were doing this. Originally, when we had planned for a weekend, but like I don't really drink during the week.
Yeah.
So I wanted to stay away from it. But I'll get you. I gotta fill some bottles or a growler of it, and I'll let you try it.
What a guy!
I still have another 5 gallons of it ready.
Does it taste different? How different does it taste compared to like a regular? How you would regularly?
If I were to do that same beer not in a barrel, it's significantly different. Like you can definitely taste the oak, a little bit of like vanilla and like almost caramel because it's from American white oak. So like that, just like people that are super into like scotches and whiskeys, like the wood gives us completely different flavor depending on the species.
Right.
So that'll change flavor. And because it's slowly oxidized, it almost like it takes on like a little bit of a sweetness, like a sherry wine. So sherry wine is slowly oxidized wine. Okay. So it's like similar to that.
Do you think you'll like doing that version better with the barrel? Or do you think that's not nearly going to be as frequent as just the regular?
It
style you
wouldn't
do
be
it?
as frequent because it's a pain.
It
Because like
sounds
after
like
you
it.
fill it, like the best way to sterilize or clean a barrel, you really don't want to add any chemicals to it. So you want to steam it. Well, like I don't have a multi-$1,000 steamer.
Not yet.
So, not yet. Well, I do have a steamer because
Santa's coming.
I have a homemade steamer because like I didn't make the idea, but I was like, there has to be another way to do this. Like some DIY people are way better than me. And I read that somebody took a wallpaper remover, which is basically has a heating element and a little bucket of water, and it creates steam. You're supposed to like just go against, and it loosens the glue. So I took that attachment off and I just threw it in the barrel and like plugged it up. So like I just waited till the outside was hot. I'm like, all right, well, pretty much steamed it. And who knows if the process worked? They could be looking back in a year or two and be like, how was that done? I don't know, reflecting back on what I thought. But I mean, I'm just getting into it. So I mean, there's so many different avenues of beer that you can go down. Like there's some people that only do stuff aged in wood, but I wanted to try it out.
All right, so let's talk about kind of your like equipment a little bit. You started with the home brew kit.
Yeah.
How did we upgrade? How did we go from caveman to more modern times here?
So I was doing the homebrew kit for a little while. I was doing what's called partial mash. Like basically you make like a 1-2 gallon batch, and so that way it has like super high sugar, then you water it down. So it'll make 2.5. Well, if I'm making say 2, then I'll water it down with 1 or 2 gallons, between 3 or 4. I pretty much got into kegging immediately. I bottled. I know you've bottled before.
Twice.
I once was my record, like bottle conditioning. I mean, like I don't want to do this. It was tedious. I hated it. I was like, there has to be an easier way here. So I got into kegging, which made my life significantly easy, even though that was a whole nother learning curve.
Why? Why is that?
Because, I mean, I do it now. I've been brewing. I just finished on December's marking my 3rd year into brewing, and most of that kegging. And I still go through this roller coaster of like a keg of beer, and I taste the beer at almost every single phase because I want to know everything. I want to know all the variables, which I got a side story of that too. But I put in the keg and like you're carbonating, and I'm like, wow, this is like the very first day. I'm like, all right, it's clearly not carbonated. I want to taste what the beer is, and carbonation brings out different flavors too. And after a couple of days, I'm like, wow, this beer is just like terrible. It's super bitter. I'm like all flustered, and like in the Charlie Papazian book, it's got a line: don't worry, relax, have a home beer. Like you didn't mess it up. And then like another week goes by, I'm like, oh, this beer's good again. And I look, it's because having too much carbonation or CO2 causes carbonic bite, which pronounce bitterness, etc. So I go on this roller coaster. I'm like, oh, this beer's pretty good. I'm like, this beer's absolutely terrible. I ruined this batch. And then I'm like, all right, it's better. And then like I wait like another week. I'm like, this beer's great. Best beer I've ever brewed. I've done this every single time, to the point where Hillary is like, I'm like, what do you think of this? She's like, it's probably not done. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So like she's my guinea pig. She's tasted every single batch I've made.
Does she have a favorite?
She really likes the barrel beer I did. There's a sour I do. I make it like probably once a year that she likes, but she doesn't drink a ton of beer, so it's kind of hard to make 5 gallons of just something she likes.
Right. Yeah.
Because then she's like, I'll have a wine.
That's funny.
The story, I taste beer at every single step. So like especially doing an IPA is a lot of dry hops. So I dry hop a beer. I want to taste it. So I take a little bit.
You're
There's
sick.
a ton of stuff floating around, right? And I take a sip. I'm like, all right, definitely bitter, but I'm like, all right, this is my gauge. So now in a couple of days I come back. Well, like maybe within 5 minutes of taking that sip of beer, like my face is starting to swell. I had no idea. I'm having some sort of allergic reaction. Like it looked like I had lip injections. It was actually really funny actually. And then I'm freaking out. Like I had to take a Benadryl and like monitor myself. Like, and then I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm allergic to beer now. I can't do this anymore. My one hobby that I love. I'm like, what the heck? Because I've heard of that happening to people. And there's like a little light reading. It was like, oh yeah, super condensed hop oils are clearly going to irritate you. But yeah, that was a little
Oh my god!
learning experience.
That's insane. How much? When was that? How early on in your career was that?
That was more recent than I like to admit.
Oh my god! Really?
Yeah,
I thought
like
this was gonna be like the first time you ever brewed beer.
No, I had my conical. So like again with this, I keep getting more and more equipment. I got from homebrew kit to I use the Robo Brew, which is like an all-in-one thing. I eventually, probably about a year ago, invested in a conical, which is like just like the fermenters you see in a brewery, just small version. Like it's got like the conical shaped bottom where you can dump things out, and it has like a sample port. So I had bought that around December of last year. So it had to have been January, February of this year that happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane. I can't even believe that was so recent.
Yeah. I mean, I had never had the ability to test a batch without getting a bunch of oxygen in there before.
Right.
So yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Cheap lip injections.
So when did you start to make more of your own recipes? Like at what point?
Way too early. Way too early. I made a lot of I made a few really bad batches of beer. Not bad, but like man, this is meh. One of the better analogies I had heard about making beer, it's like making a sandwich. Like you got to figure out what these sound like. A ham sandwich. All right, you've had one before. Kind of learn how to make your own, emulating that, and then you kind of figure out what you like, you tweak it, make it your own. I probably should have done more of that instead of like, well, never had roast beef before, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I had kind of like looking back, like, hey, there are some mistakes I made, which is actually really cool. I use this program called Beersmith, and I actually have saved every recipe I've ever done.
What is that? What's Beersmith?
It's just a brewing software that it's made by another engineer, Brad Smith, who got into brewing, and basically like all the calculations in beer that you used to have to do by hand to like figure out like, all right, how much grain is going to get, how many fermentable sugars in this wort. It'll just do it for you. Like, all right, 11 pounds of 2-row flaked wheat, blah, blah, blah. All right, it's going to get you at roughly 1065 starting gravity. So like, I don't have to do that math out.
Is it an app or is it actually like a computer software?
It's computer software. Like
really?
Yeah. And I can track my brew day stats, and like they have cloud capabilities, so you can log on and see your recipes. But like, so I'll make a recipe in that, and then brew day as it goes. It's like, all right, you're supposed to hit this number. Like, what'd you end up hitting? So I can keep my track, and then I have like a note section. Like, my most recent batch, I was experimenting with fermenting in my garage, even though it's super cold. I had like heaters and stuff, but it got like way too low. So like I'm in my notes, I'm like, all right, this batch may be a little messed up because fermenting, this happened. Like I just want to document everything along the way. Mm-hmm. So in case I whatever happens, I can figure out what it was. Like, hey, you know what, maybe a few degrees isn't a bad deal, a big deal, but no, in the future reflect back on. So yeah, looking at some of my earlier recipes, it's like, all right, I pulled something off this on the internet, and then probably one of the most dangerous things you can do is go on like the homebrew forums where everyone, it's the human embodiment of, well, actually kind of person. Like everybody knows better than everybody else.
It's like Wall Street Bets.
Yeah, everybody is like a super know-it-all. They know their craft. Everybody's, well, I wouldn't do it that way. It's like, all right, dude, well, kick rocks, man. I'm playing around making beer.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I kind of keep track of stuff. So and then kind of like gotten better, like especially like brewing that one recipe of New England IPA, kind of figured out what's working, what's not working. So I built off, like, I got a pretty solid base with that one. So like I'll make a few different recipes that are branched off of that. Mm-hmm. But if I've never made a beer before, honestly, sometimes I go to the American Homebrew Association. They've got a bunch of like award-winning beers that people have made, and like it's a great place to start by a beer that's literally won national awards.
Right. See
what I like about it, especially like if I've never had that style of beer. I did a competition, had to do a Pater's beer. Sorry, anyone who's Belgian or drinks that stuff, I'm butchering the name. So it's basically like a Belgian beer, which is very, very strong, but it's like a single. So like when the monks would brew beer, they can't drink these like super high alcohol beers. So they take the leftover grain, they would do another mash with that. So it's like a low alcohol, like they call it like a lawnmower beer with like some Belgian characteristics.
Interesting.
I had no idea. I've never even heard of it before I joined this competition. So I looked online, kind of like got the gist of it, and kind of played things safe. Like a lot of Belgian beers use like Belgian candy sugar and stuff. I'm like, well, I've never brewed with it. Like, let me kind of do something that's a little more subdued. But I won.
Did you really?
Yeah.
How did the beer come out?
It was actually really good. I liked
really?
it. Again, that was like a local homebrew. It was like 5 guys in the homebrew club. But we all brewed. We found our own recipes and did that. But yeah, it came out good.
How long did it take to make?
That one was just a typical ale, so like I fermented for 2 weeks.
Oh, so like standard, like about a month or so.
Yeah, and toss it in the keg. But like, we knew the competition coming up, and like, I brewed it early because the longer it's in the cold, it's going to drop clearer and clearer and clearer. So like, I made it kind of early and like let it sit in my kegerator for a while.
Right.
Because I wanted like to burst. If it's going to be in a competition, I want it the best looking beer it can be.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a beer purist thing, but like I toss a little bit of gelatin in there, like unflavored gelatin, obviously, and it links to like if anybody is into super home brewing, they're gonna crucify me for me oversimplifying these things, but it'll like basically attach to any proteins and drop them out, so you're left with crystal beer, but it doesn't follow German beer purity laws.
Oh wow.
Whatever.
So the IPA you made, the one that kind of the first one you made that was really your favorite, the staple you had going towards, how many tries did it take you to get that one right? Or did you just get it on the first try?
Which one? Because I brewed one recipe for a year, and then like the one I put into the competition.
No, the one you made for a year.
That one I had kind of like, that beer kind of has like a basic malt profile, like basically like really plain malts. You're gonna have just 2 row. You're not gonna have a ton of like toasted malts and all these other things that like say like Oktoberfest will have to like give out different characteristics. So like it's basically 2 row, some like flaked wheat, oats, whatever, and then that's it. It's really all not, you want as plain as possible so that way the hops will come through, because
Right.
that beer's all about showcasing hops and using a ton of them.
Is that your best beer / favorite beer?
That style, yeah, I mean, it's what I like. And then I've brewed a few other styles that like, again, because of these competitions, like I never would have brewed a hoppy brown ale, but we brewed one in competition and it was absolutely fantastic. And I definitely make that beer again.
How often do you do those competitions?
Locally, every couple months, it's like quarterly, and then you can find ones that are going on. I'm going to enter a few more. I actually want to toss my barrel beer in there to see like what someone else thinks. But it's also like these are certified beer judges, but they're still just people with regular palates at the same time too.
Right.
Like the one I had sent out, I think it was, I sent a beer out to Wisconsin for a beer competition, and like you get the feedback and the score, and like one guy was like, this is really like one dimensional. We could have added other hops, and like my whole process, like I wanted like an easy drinking IPA. Like I'm sick of having like sometimes these 8% beers that I'm like full after having one or two, and get drunk pretty quickly. Like sometimes you want to have a couple beers without being hammered.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to make. I wanted to make something that's like easy drinking. So this guy's like, it's too simple. It's not complex enough. And like the other judge was like, wow, this is really easy drinking. I could definitely crush this. I'm like, this guy gets it. So you have to take your feedback with a grain of salt.
Right. Now, do you have any idea what the qualifications are to be a judge at one of those?
You have to be BJCP, so Beer Certification Judging Program certified, which is like a whole course, and you have to do like hours. And I've debated it, thinking only for the scope of like maybe it'll help me understand beer better. And I'm not taking it off the table now. I really don't have time to do something like that, and like it is an expense.
How long does it take?
I have no idea off the top of my head. It might be like, I'm making this number up for conversation's sake, like 40 hours of whatever. I don't know.
And where do you go? Is it all online, or do you go your own pace, or you go to a class every single week or whatever?
I haven't done too much research because I haven't been like, I'm going to pull the trigger on it. So it's a mix of like online, but you need to go to events and like get signed off by like a master beer judge, stuff like that. Again, I'm not totally taking off the table, but it's a time-consuming thing where like I could brew more beer instead of getting caught up in that.
Gotcha. Now, talk to me a little bit about kind of the water quality. How does that affect the beer? Because obviously when you first start, when you got the at-home kit, it probably doesn't make a huge difference. But you play around with the water quality, don't you? So I want to hear about that. Why does that make a difference?
So first off, the reason why like you play with water quality is because you're actually with the different styles, you're trying to emulate water from around the world. So like whether you're trying to have like an Edinburgh water profile, Burton-on-Trent, or like water that they get in Munich in Germany. A lot of like if you're making an Oktoberfest, you might want to kind of get that profile, like a Munich profile or something. but the minerals affect how the beer is going to be made. It also affects pH, affects all that, and that's like the short answer. In a New England IPA, you want like a really soft beer. You don't want too stringent, but I guess pillowy, I guess, is a good synonym, I guess. So it's going to get your chloride, so higher chloride is going to give you that. You do need to maintain yeast health, so you got a little bit of calcium, but not too much. So like the safe bet, like the better water, better the beer. So a lot of people don't realize that their tap has naturally got, not naturally, but it's been added, chlorine or chloramine has been added. Getting a little feedback there.
No, you're fine.
So chlorine can boil off, but chloramine will survive the boil, and you'll taste like super plasticky pool water in your beer. So like I'll filter my beer through an RV like water filter, so I can pick one up at the hardware store. So that it's like basically a charcoal filter. Some people buy gallons of Poland Spring water. Actually, I brewed yesterday with some guys I used to hang out with in high school, and they started brewing beer, and we actually kind of reconnected over beer, which is really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. And they don't they're not at a point where they're playing with mineral additions just yet, although they've been brewing for like a year and have been looting super fast. So they'll be there in no time, but they use that because it's safe. It's, it's a good starting point. But when you get to the point of doing your water additions to tailor like what kind of taste or flavor you want, it takes a little bit. And some people will have like a reverse osmosis water system. So that way you have no minerals whatsoever. So it's like a blank canvas. You can play with it all you want. That's kind of like a lot of work. I had my water tested. So like,
did you?
Yeah. It was like whatever fee, you run your water, send it out, and they send you a PDF of like what minerals are in your water, what's your alkalinity, all that. So I use that as a starting place, and I manipulate that to where I want it to be. So yeah, I probably got that test done way too early. Like I got my water test like the first year of home brewing. So I definitely jumped the gun and like started learning about water probably a little bit too early when I should have focused on other things.
Right.
But yeah, the water is a huge aspect of it, especially in like these New England style beers.
But do you kind of think jumping around and learning all these different things like too early helped you to get where you are now, like knowledge wise?
Yeah, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes and like at first kind of feel like a master of none.
Yeah.
Like I know a little bit about everything. I don't have a great grasp on the stuff, but like it does help come full circle. Especially like once you get a little bit better, you made some mistakes and you kind of, realize like, all right, water addition is great, but like pH is even more important. That's kind of some of the stuff I had like read in those books that like kind of probably went in one or the other. Like, beta amylase. Like, yeah, I got that.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Why is the pH so important?
To facilitate enzymes. So beer is taking a grain, taking the starch and grain, the carbs, making it into sugar. Yeast eats sugar, turns into alcohol and CO2. The most basic thing possible. The enzymes between a 5.2 to 5.6 range is like when those enzymes that help break down those sugars, you're going to get the most of it. So if you are too high of a pH, you're going to get some like astringency, tannin, like bad taste. You're not going to get a ton of sugars out. Low pH, I don't have any experience with that, but again, you're not going to get the same. You're not in that optimum range. It's probably the shortest answer I can give you.
Gotcha.
And because you want as much sugar as you can get out of those grains to help turn that into alcohol.
Right. That's a very interesting process.
Yeah, and it's definitely like that's helped when you said like, what do you have for equipment? Like, well, it's when you learn that process, like, all right, now I need a pH meter. So now I got a pH meter. Well, you are doing water tests. I mean, you're doing water calculations. You need to know your water. Right, bought the water test. Now I have all these minerals. Like that's how the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah. Talk about I don't think we talked about this. We should have talked about this earlier. But talk about the kegging process a little bit, how that's different from bottling.
So the kegging process, I got mainly into it, like I said before, because I hated bottling.
Right.
So kegging, after you take it from your fermenter, tossing in a keg, hopefully they call it a closed loop, especially with NEPAs. You don't want any oxygen in. Once it's in there, you got to have CO2 sitting on it for a little bit to help saturate it, so that way the CO2 absorbs into the beer. Whereas bottling, what you're doing basically is you're restarting fermentation. So like you take your wort, well, now it's beer because it's fermented from wort into beer. That sugar is there, been eaten its alcohol. When you're putting it into the bottle into a sugar solution, the yeast that's still in that beer is going to start fermentation again. But since it's capped, like I said, yeast produce alcohol and CO2. So now that CO2 can't go anywhere, so it saturates itself. And there are some people that say like, oh, well, you know, bottle conditioning gives you like a tighter carbonation. I don't know about all that. I just know it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And there are like some delicate styles that people only do it that way, but it's tedious, and you know, you can turn over a keg pretty quick.
The most annoying thing when you're bottling is when that tube comes off. And the beer just goes everywhere. That's happened to me so many times.
Yeah.
Like, it's also just, it's kind of tough to do by yourself, I feel like. It's possible, it's doable, but you got to really be paying attention, I feel like.
Yeah, I've made a few mistakes doing that stuff too. Like I had an old fermenter set up and I was getting ready for bottling, completely forgot that like this was under pressure. So I like, there's a collection cup at the bottom. So I wanted everything, when you cool it down, everything drops into the cup. You close the lid, everything's there. So like, I'm the idiot. I'm like, all right, that's good. I got a nice clean beer right here. So I drain the beer into the keg, great and wonderful, burp it, whatever, so it doesn't have any pressure. I'm like, oh, now I just got to take it down the bottom, completely forgetting that it is a pressurized vessel at like 15 psi. So I like take it just a little bit, and it's all the pressure needed, and it just sprays hot matter across my face. It looked like it was a cartoon. All over me, up on the wall. Like, I have a textured ceiling in my basement, and like I still find like stains from it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that one was bad. That one was early on. That wasn't recent.
Was that painful?
It scared the crap out of me,
I
because
bet.
like it literally exploded. 15 psi, just going pah. And that was a pain to clean too, because it kept spraying, and I had my kegerator to my side. And like where you have the motor of a chest freezer, like needs a vent, and it just kept spraying into the motor. So like not only did I clean everything up, I had to like take this chest freezer down and like kind of take it apart to clean everything. It was absolutely horrendous.
That sounds horrendous.
Yeah. I was just defeated, especially when it happened. Like I just sat there for probably 2 minutes, like with my jaw on the floor, like
Just feeling like such an idiot.
I can't believe I did that.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so it's definitely a learning curve. I have a lot less of those, but
Everyone's got a great story. Everyone's got a great bad beat. You know what I mean?
yeah. So yeah, those definitely won't forget that.
Have you ever come close to doing that again?
I've definitely had some some oh shit moments where I'm just like, oh, that would have been bad.
Yeah.
Like I my new setup mechanical, I was dumping out yeast and like completely forgetting that it was pressurized. I like cracked it a little bit and it sprayed. And I closed it.
PTSD.
Fool me once.
Yeah, right. That's hilarious.
So yeah, that was. I mean, I'm probably just jinxing myself.
Next time you brew, you're gonna have some ridiculous disaster.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I brewed yesterday, like I said, and everything was pretty smooth. So maybe it's behind me.
Do you roast your own grains?
God, no.
Would you ever?
No.
What?
There's so much work into that.
Why is that?
You need it. It's a whole nother process. You need a lot of just like unmalted grain, and like it's just so much easier. Like I buy 55-pound sacks of grain.
Oh wow!
It sounds like a lot, but it's like 5 recipes.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, and I'm brewing like once or twice a month.
I thought you were gonna say once or twice a week.
No, I wish. That's how you get really good.
Yeah, that's like, how do you even go about like roasting your own grains? Like, where does that process even begin?
I don't know enough about it. The only thing I do know is from like a Bissell Brothers podcast that I listen to, because I'm a Bissell Brothers brewery fanboy. And there was this farmer, like northern Maine. Like I'm probably butchering this story, but let's see what the old noodle remembers. They like primarily growing like potatoes, which, fun fact I learned from the podcast, is a lot of McDonald's French fry potatoes are grown in Maine.
Really?
So they needed something else to grow. They were like, all right, well, we're growing all these other grains. Like, what else can we do? So they were growing barley for whatever other reasons. And like, all right, how else, like, what else can we do with this? So they looked into floor malting and like basically roasting the grains to different levels. So like if you over toast a malt, it's going to give you like a different, way darker color, different taste, just like roasting coffee beans. So it's just not a feasible thing to do. Like you're just way better off buying in bulk from someone who's a professional.
Do you think you'd ever do it just to try it?
I mean, I wouldn't say no. I've done a lot of random things. I'm like, meh.
I feel like it might be one of those things you try once and you're like, I'm actually a lot better at this. Like,
I don't know about that. I mean, like, fermenting is cool, and it's kind of like where like I like going down like maybe my own fermented hot sauce. Like that's pretty cool.
right.
But that's a lot less tedious than like malting grains. You need a lot. I just don't have the capabilities. It's not feasible.
All right, hops. Let's talk about hops here. So,
Hops.
what type of hops are there? Which ones do you like to use? How do you know how much to use? Kind of walk me through everything hop related here. Let's get hoppy with it. If you know what I mean.
Let's get hopping. So there are over 80 varieties of hops.
Have you tried them all?
God no.
Okay.
My approach is like I really want to know something well. So like between Hillary, probably my brother-in-law, where like I just like constantly giving out beers, like giving feedback. I'm surprised someone's be like, dude, like these are starting to taste the same, because like I'm changing different things and like they're part of the process. I want feedback,
Right.
But I'm using a lot of the same hop combinations because like I use Citra a lot. I really like Citra. Other commercial breweries, like whenever there's a beer I really like, tends to have Citra in it. All right, I want to emulate that. Bissell Brothers has a beer called Swish, and fortunately, if you go to their website, they say like what hops they use. And I'm like, all right, Citra's one of them. Mosaic, Simcoe, and like what I know about them. So like Simcoe is like a little bit dankier in taste, whereas like Citra is super fruit forward. Mosaic can be like a little bit berry like. So it's like trying to find your different ratios of that. Those are all called like cheater hops nowadays. They're all in New England IPAs. A lot of these like super fruity hops are coming from the southern hemisphere, like New Zealand, Australia. Citra is actually grown in the United States and over on the West Coast in Yakima Valley. They got a ton of stuff come out of there. So those are kind of like the new age hops. You have they call it the noble hops. It's four kinds of hops: Tettnang, Hallertau, Saaz, and Spalt. All named after where they're grown. So primarily in Germany, Czech Republic, Saaz, which territories have changed, but like basically like that's like what the medieval beer brewers used to make that with. So like those are the noble hops, the old school hops. Then you have like the C hops, Centennial, Cascade, and I don't know, my memory's shot right now. Those are like American, like kind of like piney hops. So there's definitely like, there's an evolution of it. So like they have like breeding programs, like experimental hops. And then when one will make it to the market, like Citra came on the market, I'm going to make up a number because I don't know exactly, but like, let's say like late 2010s or probably maybe early 2010s. So they breed it just like they would plants. So like, hey, I like this feature, I like this feature. Like what happens if we breed these two plants?
Right.
So they'll crossbreed and have a new hop varietal. And it's beer's an agricultural product. So hops, wherever you're grown, it's gonna take to wherever its geography is. So like some things do well, some things do better in different regions.
How many different hops have you tried?
I don't know.
78.
I mean, I don't even know like how many I've tried versus like how many I know well. Like maybe I've had it,
Right.
you know. I did start growing hops.
Did you really?
Yeah. I started growing some nugget hops in my yard from like a sapling. Again, I wish I knew better. I would have bought like a bigger rhizome, but I actually harvested them for the first time this year, and I was going to make like a wet hop beer. Like Sierra Nevada does their annual wet hop beer called Celebration. And like wet hop beer, you have such a small window to make it with because you don't want it to get moldy or dry out. So you have like ideally like you harvest, you want to brew in 24 hours. I didn't.
Wow.
And just basically let it all go to waste.
Dude, you of all people, like I figured
Right?
you'd be all over that.
This was wedding season for us, man. Every week we had 7 weddings this year to attend. So like that's
absurd.
good time, yeah.
7?
Yeah, we got a few more next year too. So yeah, I couldn't use them, and actually even with harvesting, like I harvested a little early. I actually could have got more, but I was weed whacking and accidentally hit one of the vines.
Does that ruin everything?
Yeah, like it died. Like I was like, all right, maybe like I can go harvest it later. Like 12 hours later, I like went and checked on it, and like the whole thing was like starting to wilt. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna save whatever I can. Yeah, but thankfully, like that's just 1 year. Like the rhizome is still there in the ground. It's still next year. It's gonna produce even more. Like every year, it gets bigger and bigger. So
You think you'll still continue to harvest your own?
yeah, I mean it's like a fun thing, especially like I like the idea of like hyper local. So like if I could have a pure local beer, like if I could buy grains that were malted in Rhode Island, maybe that's not an option. That's what gets me into it.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't put it past me, but I'll read all about it and then decide whether I'm going to be into it or not. I'm like the person. I'm like, I watched like some guys in India make a pool at 2:00 in the morning. I'm like, let me go on Wikipedia and figure out what it takes to make a pool. Like that's my personality. So I think when I was interested in something and I put the effort in, that's kind of what hooked me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll keep doing hops. And actually, we were house shopping the past year or so before the market got absolutely insane. And I was like, we were talking. I'm like, well, where we're going? Like, I'm taking the hops with me. Like, I'm not just gonna leave them there. It took 3 years to get to growth. Like,
Right.
So
Now, do you compare your beers to other beers? Like when you go to a brewery, are you like, I can make this better? Like I'm Matt Paiva. Paiva pours. Like,
no, I'm not. Like I'm not nearly as pretentious. Actually, I brewed beer for an entire year before I let anyone taste it.
Really? Why?
It's super personal. At least I feel that way. Like, actually, shout out to Evan. Evan was one of the first people I gave beer to for his 30th birthday. Val got 30 different beers for him to try, and I gave him some of the Hoppy Brown that I did.
I didn't even know he was that old.
Easy, I got a year on him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I had shared like obviously with Hillary and like maybe my brother-in-law, but I hate it super personal because like no one wants to tell you your beer sucks to your face.
Yeah.
Because it's personal. It takes almost a month to make something for someone to be like, yeah, this sucks. Like no one wants to make you feel that way, especially your friends and family.
Right.
So one of the reasons why I joined this homebrewing club was to like get my beer out there. That's actually why I did like the competitions and like sending it out and stuff. But it's super personal, you know. Like if you don't want to, I don't know, you don't want to be told you suck, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, so like to answer your question, like when I go, I do compare. Like basically, like first off, like is this beer good? Like, do I like it? Is this a bad beer because I don't like the taste, or is it made poorly? Like, is there something off with it?
Right.
We went to a beer festival in Connecticut, and like. Everyone's got their IPAs, whatever, because it's what the masses liked. It's like 20% of the market. And I tried one. It was made like I could just tell it was like a Hefeweizen yeast, which like typically tastes like banana and clove. And I personally hate clove. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I felt like personally attacked. I'm like, why would they put this in? I know in an IPA. But it's whatever, you know. I don't like clove taste. I don't drink a lot of Hefeweizens because of that taste. But like I can admit, like, all right, I don't like that, but this is a well-made beer. Mm-hmm. Versus like if your beer has an off taste, like it tastes like a Band-Aid or like, you know, there's some sort of infection, meaning like bacteria got in it and it's going bad, or it tastes oxidized or whatever. Then like I'll be like, all right, well, you know, this isn't good. Like your process needs to get better. But I'm constantly thinking like, all right, could I do this? Like especially if there's like breweries or brewers that like you respect, like, hey, they're constantly making a good product. Like, long lives All Seeing Eye, love it, great beer. So like, whenever I make beer, like, I'm not saying like I want to compare it to these guys I think are awesome, like Treehouses and Trilliums. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying like, yeah, I can do just as well as them. I'd like to one day. You know, like I think they're some of the best, and I want to be able to do that. Or like, what don't I like about that beer? What can I do to kind of like suit my taste while still being like kind of hyper local? Right. So yeah, I am constantly thinking about that.
Even when you're like teaching.
I mean, you do have to compartmentalize. Like,
Yeah.
you still have a job to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I daydream about it a lot.
Now, you kind of already just answered this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you take recipes? Like, say you go to a brewery and you're like, this beer is really good. I can make it better. Do you kind of like take a picture of it or write it down, like how it's made, and kind of like take it back to your lab?
More like mental notes. Like, what is it about this beer I like the hop combinations? Because I would love to know more about how different hops interact. So like if I have a good beer from somewhere and that brew, that's kind of like a new thing where people are like, oh, it's this hop, this hop, this hop. Like a brewery doesn't need to tell you that, but like it's kind of becoming the norm. So like I'm like, all right, Azacca and Cascade and Citra pair super well together. Like I'm gonna try that. And like that's actually a beer I did yesterday because I had a similar beer that had Citra and Cascade in it together. So I also had never brewed with Azacca, got a bunch on sale. Let's brew it. So so that was our experiment. Actually, the guys that I said I brewed with, they like had their own variable in this step. Like they did something we call match hopping. So that's going to be like, that basically saves me another brew. Like that, I don't have to do it because they're doing it. And then I can compare notes with them later. I can do a side-by-side tasting of like, all right, that's what you did different. And I treated my water and they didn't. So I could get to kind of like taste those variables.
Right, and see how it comes out after that.
Yeah, like because like one of the things I'm trying to learn more about is this thing called biotransformation. So like a lot of times on beers, you'll see DDH, double dry hopped. And it's just an obscure thing. Like I've had people ask me what that means. Like, does it mean twice as much? Like, yes to all of it. Like, double dry hop could just mean twice the amount, or the same amount just split into two batches, or twice the amount put in twice. Like it's all up to whatever. It's just a really loose definition. But biotransformation, a lot of these places would have like their first hop when the beer's not done yet because the yeast interacts with those hop oils. So between like these like thiols and terpenes in the beer, these enzymes will basically break that down. I'm doing a horrible job, Scott Janish, if you're watching this, talking about it. But like you can take a hop oil like geraniol, and the yeast will turn that into citronellol, which is like the chemical that makes citrusy taste. So like some hops are higher in that. So we want to play around. Like a lot of people are starting to play around with that. Like that's kind of like the new thing the past few years in like the New England IPA kind of style.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely science minded. And so Scott Janish is somebody who's like homebrewer turned pro who looks at like scientific articles and breaks them down and digests them so like the normal everyday person can kind of understand them.
Gotcha.
So he's awesome.
What's Scott? What?
Janish.
I'll have to check him out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of science behind it. So it's cool stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever had any insane mishaps where you've had to throw the whole batch out?
Twice.
Sounds like a good story based on the look on your face.
No, unfortunately, once recently. So the first time I did a wheat beer, a Belgian wit, I had gotten some sort of, I'm not sure if it was a yeast or whatever. I was getting a wicked sulfur smell, which yeast can produce that, especially in lager strains, but this was an ale strain. And like in retrospect, I probably should just like kept it in the fridge and let it mellow, but I'm just impatient. I was like, this sucks. I'm not going to give anybody this and have them be like, oh, it smells like rotten eggs. And it wasn't bad. It was just I could pick up on it. I'm like, no way I'm giving this to people. So I dumped it. And then another batch, it was actually the barrel beer I did. So the barrel beer I did was the second attempt. The first attempt, my temperature was way out of control and I had mashed too high. Like I was supposed to mash at like, so mashing is putting the grains in the water. It's supposed to be like 150 degrees, but the thermometer.
You sure?
Words are hard. Thermometer wasn't calibrated. I should have checked it first. So the thermometer was reading 150. I'm like, water looks really hot. So I took another more accurate digital one than I had. I was like, yeah, this is like 180 degrees, which is, yeah. So like it basically like turned some sugar, the grains into sugar. Like it did convert, but it's like really unfermentable sugars. So like typically in a batch, like let's say like 75 to 80% of the sugars there will turn into alcohol. It's a good number. I got like 25-30% conversion.
Wow.
Yeah, like the beer was supposed to be like 4.5%. It was like 1.2% alcohol. All those unfermentable sugars, and like,
Oh, dude, that sucks.
so I dumped it, and I probably should have saved it because like I could have threw like, and again, it's just could have been an experiment, but I could have thrown like a Brett yeast in there, which is like a wild yeast that'll help eat that. It'll help it finish out. Could have figured something out, but I was like kind of just like dejected. I'm like, get rid of this because I wanted to do. I wasn't gonna put a bad beer in the barrel,
Right.
you know.
Is that demoralizing when you have to throw a batch out like that?
Yeah, because like you're like, I suck. Why am I spending all this money? Why am I doing this? I got all this equipment. Like a brew day on average would take me 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's
so
like a full work day.
Yeah, right. So like maybe 4 hours of brewing and then cleaning. Like yesterday we lost daylight. I've got a ton of stuff in my garage I still got to clean. But I tried to clean it right away, but I just couldn't. But yeah, it's demoralizing.
I bet. So what makes three questions for you to wrap up here. First off, what makes your beer so unique? Is it just like all these little things we've talked about today that kind of add up over time, or is it just you?
I made it. I made it, so it's unique and special.
I made it.
I mean, I'm not doing anything that's reinventing the wheel.
Right.
I think like when it comes to like, maybe I'm not going to compare myself to pro brewers, but like in the home brewers, like you kind of, from what I gather, in my limited experience, like there's different people who are like very science and procedure orientated, like I tend to be, or there are people who are like, I don't know, like I just throw whatever in it, like that'll probably be good. And like two different approaches, not one's better than the other.
Right.
But I feel a lot more comfortable in like the science approach. I like understanding it, you know. I mean, I guess the understanding of the product is kind of like what I appreciate, and like giving that beer to people, and that doesn't always transfer, but you know, especially this craft beer movement is all about, I keep saying it, but like hyper local, like the tap room or destination brewery where you're visiting the tap room is the thing. People aren't focusing so much on distribution anymore. People want a place you can go local, and it's really cool. Like the product is controlling the market. Like people are willing to pay more because craft beer is expensive, man. You're paying like $16 for a 4-pack on the low end. Like I've admittedly spent way more on that. But you know, the product is, people are chasing this better product, and I want to be able to create that. I mean, like every homebrewer dreams, man, maybe one day I'll own a brewery. But if I think I can create something that's a high caliber product at this level. At least I'm trying to anyway.
Second to last question. This is the one everyone's going to want to hear. Are you going to open a brewery one day?
I would love to say, yeah, it's coming soon. I dream about it. I've priced out equipment. I've looked at a lot. I've looked into SBA loans. It is expensive to open a brewery, dude.
Really?
Like if I were to say a safe number, like you need $500,000.
What?
Yeah.
Where does the money go? Where does all that money go?
Equipment. I said equipment like I'm 6 years old. Equipment, like a 10-barrel system, just the brewing system itself, never mind all your fermenters, your glycol, like your cooling stuff, your ingredients, like just this bare bone system would cost you like $120,000.
That's crazy.
So I actually reached out to a couple companies and I got quotes on like a 3.5 barrel system, which would cost about $45,000 just for that. That's never mind. Like you want 4, 5, 6 different fermenters. Yeah. So like they're like, all right, like maybe that's not like you don't realize it's such a capital intensive business, especially when you go to a brewery. It's like, oh, you guys just moved into an old mill here, huh? Yeah,
like you go to like Tilted Barn. It's like just a barn, and you moved in here. Well, but it's so expensive.
I mean, they had the land. Like I respect what they did. They had like the perfect recipe for this. You know, they had the spot that they can do it, which is a huge cost too. Like construction cost. You need to make sure your concrete can take this beer basically an acid. So like constantly covering beer to make sure it's going to eat away at it. You don't want the concrete to go down and then like your tank falls over. You need the physical build out. So like construction is another huge cost. Whereas like Tilted Barn, from what I gather, I've listened to Matt on a couple of podcasts, and basically like they were selling beer at first. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to be successful. Like maybe I'll make like $20,000. Like this is the story I had heard from him anyway. on a podcast I was listening to. I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm friends with him. I appreciate his story. And, he was a hit, and they kind of just like started small and then slowly grew, and they have this absolutely gorgeous facility now, and they have the land for it, which is, love that place.
I wonder how much that new barn they have cost to put up.
I don't know, but like, it's not like they hired like a random builder or
Yeah.
anything. Like they hired like top of the line people, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
It's probably worth a lot more now that the price of lumber's about quadrupled
Right?
since you
It's
put
all,
it up.
it's all stick built too. Like when you go in there, like, because to your point, like you said, like are you looking at different beers when you're at breweries? Like I look at brewing spaces too. Like their stairs to go up, like they had like, it's all engineered so well. I think I don't know the proper term of carpentry for like the way they built their stairs, but it's really like old school, where it's like held together with different pins at certain sides. It was just really well made.
Yeah, that's when I went in there. It just felt new.
Yeah,
Like it had a new. You could tell it was new.
Yeah.
Like even if you aren't from Rhode Island, you could just tell it has that new vibe to
it's
it.
definitely, it smells like a new car, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, maybe one day it maybe start small or something, but like it's scary to be like, hey, quit your job, like that pension and everything you have, and like the
Leave
fact,
it.
like everything like you went to school for and you spent a lot of money to do, and you went and even got an advanced degree.
yeah,
Throw it down the drain.
yeah. It's very scary. I
beer.
agree.
Make beer.
Make beer. Yeah,
So it's like, oh crap. So like you definitely have to believe in yourself.
yeah.
So the props to anyone who's taken that journey.
You could even start off doing something like that guy from, what was that place called on Route 3? Brewing Company?
Community brewing.
Yeah, like do something like he was doing, just like a couple nights a week, something small on the side.
Well, even like Crooked Currents like that too. And like they have limited hours, but it's a lot easier to say, yeah, do it on the side. Like you don't want to start a business and kind of have your foot in.
Yeah.
Like, you want to jump all in.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I'm also not ready yet, so like maybe that's just the excuse I'm making.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's better when you start a business to kind of put your foot in at first, not go like all in, be like, I'm quitting my job.
Well, I don't want to say like, all right, cash in my pension, everything I can. Let's roll the dice on this.
Yeah, but you want to go into it with the expectation that one day you will do that.
Yeah, and like you at least want to do it right. I'm not saying you need the $500,000 build out, but like whatever you're gonna do, you want to make sure you do it right.
Exactly.
And you also want to make sure you've got a good product too.
Right.
So like I'm getting to the phase now where like I do have to get out of my comfort zone, like start just giving mass beer away. People hate it. All right, cool, whatever. That's good feedback. Actually, what I just started doing now, it's like gonna come in the mail. And this is like it's extra and like it's anyway. I made a QR code that I'm gonna like when I give somebody a growler, I'm just gonna like put it on there, and when they scan it, it's gonna be like, all right, what do you rate this beer? It's completely anonymous because like I figured no one wants to tell me it sucks to my face. Like you can probably do it anonymously. So it's like got a little scale, like, and it got just a couple of questions, and like maybe it's extra, but like especially if I give beer to somebody, like I had a friend who I gave him a few beers to try, and then he gave one to like a coworker, and he told me what the coworker said. But like, I can hear straight from him if he just scans that little code. At least that's my idea right now.
Right.
Patent pending. No one can take that.
Patent pending. All right. Last question for you.
Yeah.
The Patriots kick off in about an hour. Can Mac Jones get a win at Buffalo?
Hell yeah.
All right. That's what we're on here. Matt, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye everybody.